Yesterday at the Commissioners Forum at the ACC Kickoff, Jim Phillips spent about 30 minutes addressing the crowd on all matters: the ACC, college football, the playoff, revenue issues, the Florida State and Clemson lawsuits. And if I had a major takeaway, it is that Jim Phillips is still pretty clueless as to reality, as to what's about to happen, and as to just what is unfolding before all of our eyes. He gave his talk, he gave his speech, and then he answered questions for about 30 minutes after that as well. And I thought it was fine, right? Like, he read off a teleprompter, he had a prepared statement, and he went very presidential on things. He had some moments where he was very hyped up, very aggressive, and he had other moments where he was funny and cheerful, and he made some funny jokes in answering questions. And we've said this before. I don't think Jim Phillips is a bad guy. I don't think he's an evil person. I think he got dealt an almost impossible task, and then he, unfortunately, was not able to turn that around, and he made things worse, right? And I'll say 95% of people put in his shoes probably would have made things worse as well. Maybe somebody like a Brett Yarmark could have turned things around, but even like Greg Sankey and Tony Petitti, like those guys, I've heard the phrase the last couple of weeks, they were born on third base. You were the commissioner of a conference that is up and running and runs itself incredibly well. And so nobody else would have done much better than Jim Phillips. And so this is not a personal attack on him, but certainly want to talk about some of the things that he mentioned. My biggest takeaway from this, and maybe I should say my biggest takeaway, my first takeaway was this, is that this is an ACC football kickoff. And I love our Olympic sports. We've talked about that. We've covered them on this channel. We've interviewed every single head coach on Florida State's campus, with the exception of the brand new track coach. I love our Olympic sports and our smaller sports. But when you're at an ACC football kickoff event and you open with a video that highlights all sports, which there's nothing wrong with highlighting all sports, and your focus is on the 7 championships that ACC sports won this year, the 7 national championships, and none of those are football, it just feels weird to me. I'm not saying that you shouldn't give love to those other sports. I'm not saying that you shouldn't include them because they don't have kickoffs. Now, basketball does, obviously, but they don't have kickoffs like this. They don't have big events to get the year started. Football and basketball are the only ones, but I wonder, are they showing football highlights at the basketball kickoff? I wonder if they're showing, volleyball highlights at the basketball kickoff. I don't know. Tip-off, I guess they call it. And so it was weird to me that that's the way that things started. It wasn't just all the football stuff that went on, which there was a lot of good football played in this conference last year. And we certainly could have focused on wins against the SEC, how the Seminoles and the ACC had a winning record against the SEC, how they were one of the best teams out of conference in the Power Five that existed. But we didn't do that. We focused on, football was included, but we focused on the sports that aren't necessarily generating revenue and aren't really relevant to what's going on in football. He mentioned Cal, Stanford, and SMU before he mentioned the reigning football champions. It seems a little crazy to me that you would have a football kickoff where you're kicking off the football season right before teams go into fall camp, which Florida State goes into fall camp on Wednesday. So you're 2 days before that, right? And not mention the reigning champions of your conference. Now, I think that's intentional. I think you can tell from some of Phillips' comments later that he was pretty aggressive, that he was pretty pissed off about Florida State and Clemson doing what they're doing, and that certainly was evident. That certainly came out. But to mention Cal, Stanford, and SMU, 3 weird ads. I actually do like SMU. I'll say 2.5 weird ads. And then mention them before you mention the reigning champs at a football kickoff. Felt weird to me. Again, he emphasized how the ACC is in such a good place, and they won 7 different national championships, and how the ACC leads in academics in 3 key categories across all conferences at the football kickoff. Again, highlighting things that aren't football related. He did talk about revenue. He talked about how right now the ACC is top 3 in revenue brought in, behind the Big Ten and the SEC, but ahead of the Big 12. And obviously ahead of every other conference, that is group of 5 or lower. And he said that he expects revenue to remain top 3 for kind of the long term. I don't know that I agree with that. I certainly think Florida State and Clemson get out. My thoughts around the August 15th date maybe shifting, but I don't think that is realistic to think that the ACC's revenue stays top 3 for a long time. Now, he does have to project confidence, right? Like, I saw Jake Crane of Crane & Company say this on the timeline earlier today. He said, what is Commissioner Phillips supposed to do? What is he supposed to just go up there and sound the alarms and say, Titanic is sinking, we need help, send the flares off? Or is he supposed to project confidence? And I do agree with that to an extent, right? Like, Commissioner Phillips can't go up there and just say, like, well, it's a crap show. We are all going to hell right now. Like, we have no idea what we're doing. Pray for us. I get it. He can't do that. But I do think there is, some potential for there to be a little bit more realism shown, a little bit better foresight. It's some of his decision-making that's put us into this, and some ownership maybe that, we are falling behind other conferences, and we got to figure out a way to catch back up. That is some of the language that needs to come out. Not everything is peachy keen. Everything is good to go. We are set, and we are happy with top 3. When you think about it, you think about the revenue that the big 2 bring in, and then there's a distinct difference between the revenue between 3 and 4, and then there's a distinct difference between like the group of 5. Like, they don't make anything down there. And so to act like top 3 is something that's impressive when you're about to get passed by the Big 12, and when there really isn't anything else comparable. Like, you're just kind of the best of that middle tier, right? And, obviously you're better than the group of 5. I don't know that that's something to tout. Being better than the Big 12, I guess, is a big deal. You lasted longer than the Pac-12. I guess that's a big deal. But it reminds me of the meme of the dog sitting in fire saying, everything's fine. Everything's fine. He's just drinking his coffee. Like, no big deal. That's what Phillips reminds me of. Everything's fine. We're top 3. We're going to be top 3 for a long time. Nothing to worry about. Even if that was the case, even if we thought we would be top 3 for a very, very long time, I still think there's something to worry about. He mentioned a couple of times, it almost sounded like he was quoting the Brett McMurphy article, talking about Florida State and Clemson being very disruptive. He used that same word, which is not necessarily a word that I think has been thrown out very much. It's not necessarily a word that I think has really gone on over the last year or so of these lawsuits and Florida State's Board of Trustees saying that they need to get out of the ACC. It is certainly a newer phrase, something that seems to have come out here recently from Brett McMurphy. And it almost makes me wonder if, and I know Brett said, I got this from an SEC source, whatever. It almost makes me wonder if that word wasn't either used between Brett and Commissioner Phillips or somebody on Commissioner Phillips' team, or if Commissioner Phillips saw the article and said, I think that's a good word. I think I'll start to use that, which is hilarious in either situation. Now, a word that we've never heard before in this whole conference realignment thing, maybe they both used it within a week of each other, and that was just happenstance. I tend to guess that that's not the case. But yeah, he used the word disruptor twice. He was very upset. He was the most upset when he started talking about former Commissioner Swafford. I want to talk about that because I think that is the most interesting part of his conversation and of his talk. But first, I do want to give a little bit of love to the Mango Board. Yesterday was National Mango Day, and they celebrated by rolling out a brand new website. We want to celebrate with them. We want to do a giveaway for you guys, which I'll tell you about in just a moment. But go to their website, mango.org. There's a whole host of new interactive features. There's an online scavenger hunt. There's a limited time social media giveaway. Fans of Mangoes can win prizes, whether they're gold, silver, or bronze, all inspired by the start of the summer games coming later this week. And like I said, we're going to do a giveaway with them. 25 mangoes and an FSU Mango branded polo shirt. All that you need to do is tag at Mango Board on Instagram, X, or Facebook with some mangoes that you've purchased recently. You want to go to the store and take a picture of some mangoes and purchase and do it that way? Great. You want to get on one of the delivery apps and send a screenshot? That works too. Grab a couple mangoes. You're spending $3 or $4 on some mangoes, and you'll be entered to win by tagging at Mango Board on Instagram, X, Twitter, or Facebook. Appreciate the Mango Board for their support. All right, he got fiery when he started talking about former Commissioner Swafford. Obviously, Florida State has alleged in their lawsuit that Commissioner Swafford acted with some nepotism, acted with some inappropriate motives, some behaviors that we'd say like, man, I don't know necessarily that he should have done this way with the Raycom deal, which obviously benefited his son, who was an executive there at Raycom at the time. Obviously, I don't know the truth behind that. I don't know if that really is the case. I don't know if Florida State did that because they certainly have like a smoking gun, or if it was to incite the emotion that we saw yesterday and Florida State felt like being petty and so they went after it. But either way, he was upset about it and he was pissed and he said our conference deserves better. He was fiery. He was red. He was mad about it. And I saw people tweet this, and so this isn't an original idea. And so credit to my buddy Craig who tweeted this. But the frustrate, like I've never seen a commissioner of a conference be that angry over anything. Like it felt like your dad yelling at you and being pissed off. If ESPN wouldn't flag our media, like I'd show it to you. But go to the highlights from it yesterday. I know people tweeted it out. He was mad. And it just made me think, and I saw tweets that said this, what if he had shown that same emotion after Florida State got left out? What if that same passion and emotion and intensity was shown for the Seminoles when they got snubbed, as opposed to a 20-word note that he put on a graphic and had sent out from the ACC account? Like, how much different would we view, and I don't think we would, like, all of a sudden not want to leave the ACC because he had our back, right? I think we would still try to be getting out of here. But how much differently would we view him if he had done that? I think part of the frustration with Jim Phillips is not necessarily anything he says, anything he said yesterday in the talk or anything like that. It's, number one, the fact that he helped perpetuate the mess that we're in. I don't want to say he created it because I think that was well before he was there, but he helped perpetuate the mess that we're in. And he's been more adamant about Florida State and Clemson leaving this conference, partly due to what happened, than he ever was about defending us. I almost wonder if it would have been like North Carolina that was 13-0 and their quarterback got hurt and they were left out. What would he have been like then? If it was a Tobacco Road school, if it was a school that, was part of the original foundation, you think there would have been political pressure from the state of North Carolina for him to absolutely go off in the state of North Carolina over that? Because this 20-word, this is not right, graphic that we got, frankly, wasn't enough. And I think that if he had really gone to bat for Florida State, remember, this was pre-lawsuit. Lawsuit came around 2 days before Christmas, 2 or 3 days before Christmas. That was not in any way close to the snub, which happened on the third or fourth. And so I just wonder if he'd have treated both situations the same, if we would view him a little bit differently. Hey man, we don't necessarily like you. We don't necessarily want to stay here, but at least you had our back. I guess at least you fought for us once. But no, it's like the rest of the time in the ACC. They've never cared about Florida State. They've never fought for Florida State. And so why would that one be any different? So we're now 20 minutes in. He finally says, hey, I'll get to football in just a minute, but I want to talk about one more thing, and then we'll get to it. Again, this is a football kickoff. He's gone 20 minutes without talking about football, and he says, I'll get to it in a minute. I know you guys all came for football, but we're going to continue to talk about other things. He brings up the ESPN Disney media deal with no mention of the look-in or the opt-out. He was asked about it in a follow-up about the renewal, about the look-in, and he basically gave a sidestep generic answer of like, we've never been more sure of our partnership. He didn't say, no, it's been signed. We are good to go. And he obviously didn't say it was declined either. But there was no assurance. It was just, hey, we feel good about our partnership, which is certainly telling. We've told you. I think ESPN has already told the ACC, like, we're not renewing that thing. Like, we're I don't know if they're going to opt out, renegotiate, get Florida State and Clemson out. I don't know what the ESPN move is going to be, the chess move that they pull off, but it's interesting to me that ESPN wouldn't go to defend one of their members in the ACC, one of their clients, to say, no, we are going to support them. We are going to go ahead and renew it. And it's now what, August or July, August of 2024. That's got to be done by February 25. We're getting pretty close. Let's go ahead and get that thing done. We're 6 months away and it's still not done. He talked about the expanded playoff. I thought this was hilarious. He said the expanded direct quote, the expanded playoff will be good for the ACC. And I thought, no crap. The expanded playoff is good for the ACC. After what we went through last year, Where the ACC wasn't good enough for the playoff, now the expanded playoff will be good enough for the ACC. It's kind of funny to hear. You guys, I don't need to belabor the point on the snub. They touted this toughest non-conference schedule thing that I still don't understand. I think when you're recruiting maybe to a kid, you say, hey, we're going to play the best here every week, and you're going to get to play against the best and you're going to be the best. I guess that kind of makes sense. But when you say that you have the toughest non-conference schedule, if your games are difficult or more difficult than normal, what does that mean for the teams that are playing you? Well, it certainly doesn't mean that their games are also more difficult than normal. It means that their games are probably slightly easier than normal. And so what is the ACC doing here? They're literally, this is how much of a dumpster fire they are. They're literally telling you we're weaker than our competition. The other conferences, the other Power 5 conferences that we're going to play, when they play us, it's tougher for us, it's easier for them. Could you imagine the SEC ever admitting that the schedule gets tougher when you go out? Could you imagine the way that they love their conference, the way that they love that, every week's a battle, it just means more, blah, 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 whatever. The way the Big Ten is proud of their conference, Big Ten football, that's just Big Ten defense there. The Big 12, the way they play, I could not imagine any other conference ever saying, yeah, when we go outside, it gets tough, man. We suck in here, but man, it is tough when we go on the road. It is tough when we play non-conference. The SEC would never do that. The Big Ten would never do that. Again, I don't think the Big 12 would ever do that. I think that's the weirdest phrase ever. He touted it like it was a big deal. So 27 minutes in, he finally gets to mentioning Florida State by name. He mentioned Florida State and Georgia Tech playing in Dublin and how proud he was of that matchup. And later on, he was asked a question. A big takeaway I had was he was asked a question about the lawsuits, and he gave a phrase or a quote that was, this conference is bigger than just one school or schools. And I understand that phrase. And obviously, as a Florida State fan, your immediate reaction is, no, it's not. It is just Florida State and Clemson. But if we're being real, there are other teams in this conference. There are other programs in this conference, and the kids that compete in those sports are worth just as much as the kids that compete in any other sport at Florida State or Clemson or wherever. And so, yeah, the conference is bigger than just one school or schools. That's never been the complaint, I don't think, from Florida State. The complaint from Florida State has been, hey, we've held up our end of the bargain. We've continued to bring you eyeballs. We've continued to lift this conference up to a place that it probably should not be. You've not necessarily done the same for us. You haven't defended us when we got snubbed. You haven't done things for us to ever give any preferential treatment to the non-Tobacco Road schools. But we've done our part in lifting up this conference, Florida State, Clemson, and some others. And now we want to be rewarded for that. Yeah, at the end of the day, Commissioner Phillips just doesn't get it. He doesn't have the foresight to do anything about this situation that we're in. He didn't have the foresight to do anything about the situation that we're in. He didn't vote to expand the playoffs. That screwed FSU last year. He didn't make aggressive moves in realignment like the Big 12 did. He didn't work to help Florida State and Clemson with the revenue disparity. Florida State and Clemson are the bad guys right now. I get it, but they did try to privately handle this thing for a long time. Remember back just in 2020, early 2023, when they had ACC meetings in Amelia Island. That was the conversation. That was the talk. I spoke with people at Amelia Island, at the ACC meetings, when they announced the different revenue share model and the way that they'd reward success. And you can win up to 20. You can earn up to $25 million more. All you got to do is win a national title in both football and basketball. So no big deal. Really, really easy to get done. But yeah, I think the idea of earning more because of what's going on is interesting. But Florida State asked specifically for some different concessions, some different things to help them in this process. And for whatever reason, the ACC couldn't deliver. Now, I don't know if it was stubbornness. I don't know if it was just an inability to. I don't know if they ultimately wanted to force Florida State out. I don't have any idea. But they weren't able to meet the requests of one of their members. And then again with Clemson, and I think you'll see it with other teams coming too. And so Florida State and Clemson did what they felt they had to do to survive. I get it. They're the bad guys right now. They're the disruptors. They're the ones that everybody hates. They're the, it is very anti-Florida State and Clemson around these parts these days. But if you're them, I don't know what options you have. If your option is to sit by idly and be a good guy and then wither on the vine and die, or be a disruptor and have a chance to survive this thing, I think you choose being a disruptor all the time. I think, not to get super historical on you, but that's what our entire lives have been. That's what our entire existence has been, is people that disrupted, and maybe they were doing it for the right thing. Maybe they were doing it for the wrong thing. Motives, I don't know. But our entire life has been just based on people disrupting things for causes they believed in. We mentioned this last week. Was the Big Ten a disruptor when they grabbed USC and UCLA? Started the fault lines cracking in that conference? Were they more of a disruptor when they went and got Oregon and Washington after saying they weren't interested? Was the SEC a disruptor when they took the best two teams out of the Big 12? Oh, well, they did that closer to the grant of rights buyout, so it's not as bad. Is it? You did it sooner, so it's not as bad? I don't think that matters. Disrupting is disrupting. Is Florida State just a little bit more disruptive than Texas and Oklahoma because they did it earlier in a grant of rights process because they had to sue to get out? Are they more of disruptors than Maryland is? Because Maryland did the same thing in 2013. And so I get it. They're the bad guy right now. That's a title, a cross. They'll wear that. They'll bear that. And it's going to give their program a chance for success in the long term, which I don't think they have in the ACC. We've talked a ton of realignment. We've talked a ton about speculation, rumors, thoughts, sources, intel. All of that is within a conference realignment playlist here on YouTube. You can certainly go check that out. I'll link it on the video so you guys can click it if you want to. We've got a ton more coverage coming out of ACC Kickoff. Some really good conversations with Josh Farmer, Pat Payton, Darius Washington, and even Coach Norvell. But make sure that you're subscribed so you don't miss any of that. I appreciate you guys for tuning in. We'll talk to you soon. Go Noles.